right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. We're going to go ahead and get started. A couple housekeeping things before we get started. We do this once a month, every first Wednesday of the month, and it's really a time for us to just open our doors, answer any questions that you might have about Office Hours or about Office 365, and really help you get unstuck. So this is a time for you to drop questions that you have in chat. We do have a handful that we got ahead of time that we're going to be talking about here in a minute, but feel free to drop any questions that you have in chat, and then we'll kind of just go down the list and tackle them one by one. Let's see, what else do we have? The thing that I wanted to share before we get started is if this sort of interaction is helpful to you, if you are someone who says, oh, it's great to have someone just to tap on the shoulder who probably knows the answer to what I'm stuck on. We're actually trying to build a community right now, a paid membership community where you can join and be part of a group of leaders who are trying to build a better workplace for their employees with Microsoft 365. And we're kind of in this like pilot process for it right now. We would love to know if anyone is interested. If you are, feel free to reach out to us and we can get you in. The kind of details around that, right now we're targeting $999 for a year membership. But if you are interested in getting in and kicking the tires during this pilot process, we're giving half off for life for that program. So if it's interesting to you, now would be a good time to think about getting in there. We do that on a yearly basis. So we would love to know just who is joining and where you're joining from. Feel free to drop in chat kind of where you're joining from. Make sure you can see and hear us. And then we can go ahead and get started with one of our first questions. The one that I wanted to tackle first is someone asked us about the help desk app, and they said that they were having trouble with logging in as an admin user after configuring it, and they can't select the drop-down list. This is from Lincoln Mogane. The thing that I can tell you is almost all the time it's just a misstep in the configuration process. Everyone that brings something like this to me, I say, revisit the blog, go through the steps, step by step, and make sure that you're doing each thing with the right details. There's often things like casing problems or just little details that aren't getting copied and pasted correctly. And then people have luck and they can sign in as the admin, and it's probably just something little. So just retrace steps and go through. It looks like we have Des Moines, Iowa, and California here. Awesome. Welcome, you guys. We are live on both YouTube and Teams. So if you have a question on Teams, you're welcome to raise your hand and we can take you off mute and we can kind of chat back and forth if your question warrants it. And then on YouTube, you guys are stuck with just chat. Welcome. I'm here with Matt. I didn't do intros. My name is Mitch. I help with a lot of the operations and marketing and some technical projects here, but I have Matt here with me this month as well.
Yeah. Hey, I'm kind of the head of the communication collaboration space. But both Mitch and I are super knowledgeable, so we'll answer any questions we can.
Cool. All right. I didn't see any in chat already. Let's just start with Eric.
I want to do the second one.
Second one. So yeah. Eric Corbetts.
Yep.
He's here in the Teams.
Yep, he's on the Teams.
Let's dig into.
Yeah. Can we share my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So, Eric, basically, you just had
Let's.
Yep.
What's the question?
Yeah, I'm getting to it.
Okay.
So the problem that that was identified is that he's having a problem with basically this. The formula, basically. So this is a Canvas app. I'm not exactly sure what Eric was using this for in particular, but the general gist of it is that, what I can see it doing is adding some dates and wanting to do it based on a weekday. So what day of what day within the week it is. And so, he basically sent us this big formula. A lot of this formula is, not super relevant to the actual problem. So the original formula looked like this. And it comes up with an exception, basically saying that Monday is not recognized, which is all related to the method called weekday. And so the way that I would go figure out what's going on is if I hover over or select on this option, up here you can see start of week, a value from the start of week enumeration. And so the fact that this is coming from an enumeration and the enumeration has a name, like start of week, tells me that what you really need is week dot. And then with this, it just works. I formatted it differently. It was formatted like this originally, which is basically no formatting, just one big line. But I like to look at it this way because especially in complex formulas, it's a little easier. But as you can see, when you come down on this, you can see that if I put in 11/1/2023 as my date up here, you're going to get 11/2/2023. Again, I'm not super familiar with what all of you were trying to do, but my expectation or understanding is that the main problem you're having is this Monday is the main challenge.
Business days.
Yep. Trying to do basically get the business days between them all. So hopefully that answers your question because I hope it was a syntax issue. If it's not, raise your hand, put it in chat. You can come off mute. We can chat about it a little bit, but
cool. He says that was the problem. Thank you.
Okay.
Good stuff. It's the little syntax things that haunt us all the time.
And the reason why I showed it this way is because I want everyone here to be able to figure out that themselves. Like you knowing that, hey, I can look up here, I can be in the formula, look up here and read what it's saying up here and try to translate that into what it means, I think is the key, right? So if you have a problem in the future, click on this. It's going to be an esoteric error if you hover over the red, but if you look up here, you can sometimes kind of figure out what's going on based on what you see in this description up top.
Cool. Let's jump to a question we had on YouTube from Santhin. They said, can you share me any code review tools for Power Apps? Are there any ways to check or to create that process of maybe they're asking, I'm wanting to get code review from someone. How do I have someone approve that?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a very loaded question. So code review can mean lots of things. It can mean I want to be able to have somebody do a pull request, if you will, right? And say, oh, I approve that this is good enough, right? And if it's about the approval, a lot of that is going to be pipelines. So in the paid world, it's going to be, you should be looking at managed pipelines and managed environments. In a non-paid world, there is integration with GitHub and with Azure DevOps that allows you to basically store the source code, if you will, the configuration files from your app in those platforms, in those traditional source code platforms, where you can do pull requests and all sorts of stuff. But it's not really going to be the same, quite the same thing as a code review, as those configuration files will be pretty challenging to look at and make sense of. They only really make sense if you're actually looking in the designer most of the time. But that's what I would say. I don't know if that really answers all of your questions. If it doesn't, if there's something more, feel free to put it in chat. And if you don't know what either of those things are, we can point you to some resources related to those. We have some things that we've published about that. We've also got some things that we can share from Microsoft about that if you're interested.
Cool. They said thank you. Yeah, it's been something that's I've seen evolve over the last couple years as Power Apps has gotten a little popular. Is how do you actually integrate this into application lifecycle?
ALM,
and so good notes there. We come from a more code heavy world, and so we're used to doing actual code reviews. And
reviews,
so Power Apps, it kind of feels like you need to get the closest version of that in into those code review tools, and then you need to kind of figure out. It's not obvious exactly what changes in a Power App based on the code that has changed. I would say
Correct.
that's the only other, like you move a button, how do you know if that changed in the
Yep.
code? It can be a little bit tricky.
Cool.
Cool.
Do you want to do the last one that we got kind of ahead of time?
Yeah. Just a reminder, we are doing this both to and YouTube. You're welcome to drop any questions that you have in chat, and we'll get to them as they come in. And I did want to mention, too, a lot of these questions that we get just naturally, because we post Power Apps videos and things that trigger people to ask technical type questions. We're happy to answer those. I did want to kind of reinforce, they don't all have to be technical questions. If you have a more like strategic type question for how do I have my team use Teams better, right?
Yep.
More than happy to dig into things like that as well.
Yeah, Teams, SharePoint, Outlook, like any of those technologies, if you have questions about either the technology or how to use them, or even in the development space, how to use those, feel free to ask those. So I'm going to go through that last one. That was a pre-request question. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
I'll read the question and let you answer. So they said, this is from Eric Panel. He said, hello, I'm trying to create a process flow between 3 groups in Power Apps. Group 1 completes a form with customer data. Then it goes to Group 2. They take that data and fill out a separate set of fields. And then Group 3 verifies receipt of that document in an external inbox. Choices received, yes or no. And then Group 1 reviews all the information received from the previous 2 groups to confirm validation. So something going through a stepped process and making sure that information gets added along the way and then goes back. I would imagine there is some form of Power Automate functionality that needs to take place. What should I do?
Yeah. So, the question as it is pretty open-ended. I don't see Eric on the call today, but the things that we would really need to understand in order to have really architect this or come up with a plan is like what licensing you have, right? If you're dealing with SharePoint as the back end, I think the approach would be different than if we're dealing with Dataverse or something else. In general, like this should be really easy to kind of deal with. If from a Canvas app perspective, I might have 2 or 3 different forms basically that trigger email and trigger approvals and all of that. So maybe Group 1 has a form that is capturing and getting this data from the customer, or if you again, back to licensing, if you have it, maybe it's a Power Pages application that actually, the customer completes the form, not, an internal group resource. Maybe you have a Power Pages form that a customer logs in and fills out that form and submits it, right? Once that's submitted, you're talking about basically notifying somebody and giving them a link back into the app to say, okay, you need to fill out more information. Go here, fill out the more information. And then it's unclear what happens between, 2 and 3, which is like there's a time, you filled out some more information, and then later on there's some sort of email that comes in. If you can make the email have something that you can map, maybe you just trigger based on the email and you don't have somebody fill in things or verifies. It's just like, oh, an email came in. I can map that back to here. I can see that there was an attachment. That's good. And it just marks that item as updated. And then the last one is, it goes back to somebody to review it. That might be an approval process where you say, hey, approve this item, approve this piece of content, where it goes out to them and does an actual, full Power Automate approval flow to make that happen. So
I just dropped a link to a video from Matt Kahn, one of our team members. He walks through the difference between approvals and emailing with options, kind of relevant to what we're talking about. So maybe that'll give you some ideas of what the tool can do.
Yep.
Benjamin, can you copy that to the YouTube world just for anyone out there?
And I'm again, without Eric here, without understanding a little bit more, it's hard to go into too much detail. But this is definitely a scenario that can be handled and can be handled pretty easily. there's just a lot of questions about like what's the details,
Oh.
what's the things that they need. So I think that answers it. Obviously, he's not here to ask more questions.
Yeah,
but
we
I
just
think,
give the generic answer if he's not here. So
Yep.
that's what you got. Thanks for the question. Next, we have Jen Cunningham. Jen says, my team is going to be migrating to Dataverse soon. Any advice? It's exciting.
It depends on what it means. Jen, can you provide you should be able to come off mute. I think maybe we've
Here, I can.
yeah we'll allow some you to come off mute. But what do you mean by migrating to Dataverse? Because that's usually a very technical thing. Like, hey, I have this application that's currently using SharePoint and I want to move it to Dataverse.
Looks like she's unmuted.
But it also could be something else.
It is definitely that. We have an app that kind of grew legs over the last couple of years,
Yep.
And we've just been using SharePoint. We actually there's probably 5 or 6 different lists behind the scenes that we're using Power Apps to kind of wire everything together. We've got a couple other kind of child apps attached to kind of those same lists doing different functions, but our data is just getting too big. Our app is trying to do too many things. So we're in the process of moving all of our backend data to Dataverse, and then we'll be unplugging SharePoint and plugging in Dataverse on the app.
Meaning
So, just curious.
Canvas app, or meaning
Yes,
you'll be moving
it is
to
a Canvas app.
Okay, so you asked about recommendations. So the first thing I would do is like if you haven't, it sounds like you've already got an environment maybe, or you've already got access to Dataverse to start moving some of the data. I would start thinking about, and which would imply to me that you've already resolved any licensing concerns, meaning, you understand the licensing ramifications of doing what you're about to do, and you have the appropriate licenses you need for your end users. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So then if you have that sorted out, I think the next thing that I would recommend you look at is, I'll ask another question. Are you currently developing in solutions and using that technology to manage changes?
We're not.
Okay. So
And that is something that I know we probably should be doing.
yeah, you really need to in this world. And it goes with, so did you get a separate environment, or are you like using a default environment? Like what was provided to you to start doing this development activity?
Right now we're in default, but we haven't. So my team hasn't turned on, or we haven't turned on our Dataverse environment yet.
Okay.
It's still coming, but we've kind of signed some agreements and we're moving forward in that direction. We just haven't yet.
Okay. So in an ideal world, I would encourage you to get multiple environments. So one environment for development, one environment for at least production, most likely one for test. And the reason I say that is that you're going to want to make changes it's similar to what happened with SharePoint, and I don't know how you were dealing with it at SharePoint, but you want a list is a list is a list. If you add a column or delete a column or whatever, like it's going to have an impact on your app unless you're like really being careful or creating a separate list that is like your development list and then swapping between and managing all. Like it's a challenge. You're going to have the same problems in Dataverse, only it's going to be even more complicated because you're going to make a change to a view and you're going to want to use that, or you're going to make a change to a table and your flow may not see it right away until you publish it. But if you publish it, then everybody can see it, and it's compounded even more. So creating a dev, test, prod, and using that solution architecture to deploy between them, and using managed environments and managed pipelines to manage that deployment is going to be something I would highly encourage you to kind of sort out early on, so you're not caught with challenges. And then the other thing I would say is, do you really have to use a Canvas app? Like Canvas apps are meant for the need to have all of the custom UI, right? Now you could say custom, yeah, more than model driven. You could say, well, we need that because that's what we have, and it's the easiest path for us to get from one to the other, and that's fine. That's fair. It's completely fair. If that's the justification, no issues, right? If you're doing it because it's what you know, and you're going to have to rework it significantly anyways, which is, I think, probably more the situation you're going to be in, I would just do a model-driven app unless you have a reason to do it in a Canvas app. model-driven apps is where you get the most value and the most bang for your buck in relation to, it takes me 2 seconds to make something change, right? Because you're not worrying about all the pixel moving of a field here or a field there, or if you are, you're doing it on a form that's shared in 7 different ways, and when you make the one change, it applies to all of them, right? So thinking about and being purposeful about whether or not you really need to use a Canvas app. There are reasons to use a Canvas app. You may be in one of the reasons to use a Canvas app, but if you can use a model-driven app, you're going to be better. It's going to be a better experience for you in the long run. So those are the things I would say.
I want to channel what I think Mike would say too, and at least what I saw him experience when he moved kind of into the Dataverse model-driven world was there's a lot of stuff that's already here that he thought he was going to have to build himself.
Yeah.
So you might have existing data or things in your head of, I need to build this. Try to leverage the things that are already built that have all different connections and relationships in place if you can. And that will probably shortcut your process.
A great example of this and why this is a pro and a con is a lot of the views have export the data as Excel built into the interface, right? If you're dealing with a user that is on the back end that's like data entry and data management, that may be a feature they might want to use in the future that could cost you a lot of money to implement, and it's just built in as an example. However, if you're building an app that's like, I'm dealing with somebody that only uses this app once every 6 months, and they don't need any of that stuff. They just need stupid, simple, do this, click a button, I'm done, and I submitted it or I changed it. That's where the Canvas app helps.
Right.
Because it removes all of the distractions and it's super basic, right? But most of the time what the common scenario is for an end user that is a consumer or an input into a system, Canvas app, Power Pages, those are really good solutions. For the person that's in there every day and it's their system that they're in that runs their work or is, they're heavily involved in, the model-driven app is just a way better solution for them. And even for ones that are only there every once in a while, it can often be not worth it to have to do the Canvas app thing. But that was a long answer. Jen.
Let me recap.
Yeah, go ahead.
Super helpful though.
Yeah. So the first thing was, now I just blanked. What did we talk about first?
So
environments
and environments. Solutions. Yep, and solutions. Yep.
Super important to make sure no one's monkeying around with production stuff, making sure everything stays the same between versions and it's very collected, just an easy process. And then we talked about,
Canvas versus model-driven apps.
Canvas versus model-driven.
Yep.
Model-driven is pretty powerful in the Dataverse world, and you can't really have without Dataverse, so it might be your first interaction with that. And so play around with that, see if that helps from a management perspective, and then use Canvas apps only as an intake stepped process that needs to be really catered towards your users. I did drop a couple links in the chat, one about solutions that one of our team members, Michaela, wrote, and then Mike put together a model-driven apps 101. Yep. So hopefully those are helpful, kind of open the door to that world for you.
The last thing I'll leave you on is it's exciting. It's amazing. Moving from using SharePoint as a data source to moving model-driven is transformative in how you can approach development, how quickly you can approach development. It may be painful at first to kind of understand the paradigm shift, but once you get there, you'll never want to go back. That will be the way that you want to develop.
We still use SharePoint as a data source sometimes.
We do, yes. Mostly when people can't afford to, they don't want to pay for the license.
No, we do internally.
I
built the process.
For sure, yeah. I mean, there is still plenty of use cases for it, but most of those use cases are not in what you would consider to be actual full-on application. It's for It's for a little automation kind of stuff. If you're actually building an application where the data really, really matters, Dataverse is definitely a better approach.
Cool. I'm just going to reset us here quick. If you're just joining us, maybe in the YouTube world, just wanted to say welcome. This is our monthly office hours, a time where we can hopefully get you unstuck with some Microsoft 365 situations that you find yourself in. We do this the first Wednesday of every month. And yeah, it's really just a time for you to drop questions, us talk through them, and yeah, get you back on the right track. We do have another question from Cynthia. I'm going to read through it here. She asked, is there a resource you can point me to that tells me the snippets of code that I should put in my submit button in Power Apps so that when I click the submit button on my form, that one, it saves the data to my SharePoint list and calls my flow. It's currently submitting the data to a list, but I can't get it to start the flow. I found a number of YouTube videos, but their Power App UI looks different than mine, and my Power Automate Flow UI uses V2, not the regular Power Automate action. And then the second question is, how much does the one-on-one coaching cost? I'm going to let Matt do the first one, but I'll say the one-on-one coaching, we do that as an hour-and-a-half session. I think it's $500 right now.
Yeah.
Just really low barrier of entry. You can book it all yourself, and it takes care of all the
But you could join the community.
Yeah, for the same price.
For the same price. For a similar price.
If you missed
get a year of.
Yeah, we're launching a paid membership community where you can kind of get a forum-based support from us, and we can kind of build together. We're
even doing, like, we're still figuring out exactly all of the details of it. But as an example, you get the opportunity to be in a hot seat on a regular basis, which would be like a private coaching, except for it would be open to the community. They would see it. But you would get access to that. Right. You have to say you're interested, and then we have to select you as a person. That's how we're doing it right now. But anyways, my point is, yes, the one-on-one coaching is there, but we're also trying to get feedback and interest in the community because we want to know if it's a good way to provide more resources like this. Yeah. So as for the question, Cynthia, if you wouldn't mind, it would be great to talk with you if you want to come off mute. I don't know whether or not somebody's enabled you yet, but that would be great. So my question really comes to a submit button. I presume we're talking about a Canvas app, but is that a custom form, like a custom SharePoint form, or is that a separate Canvas app is kind of my first question.
He likes to start them all with questions instead of just giving
an answer.
Yeah, I think you know an answer.
I mean, I don't know whether I know an answer. I can move forward. Like the reality is, if in both cases, my question would be, why do you have to start the form or the flow from the button? Flows can have triggers based on the list item getting created. That would be my default for how to do this. There can be reasons that you want to have it happen as part of the trigger. However, that save button in the SharePoint customization, I don't think you can do that. I just don't think you can do that at all. So if you're doing a custom form in SharePoint and you want to click the button, save the data, and call out, I don't know that you can do that.
Looks like she's off mute now.
I found the unmute button.
No, okay.
I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. The list, the only purpose for the SharePoint is to store the data.
Yep.
I went into Power Apps to create the Canvas app. And I only used Canvas app because I'm like 3 weeks into this, like my experience with any of these applications. So I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
It's going to be 3 people using this every once in a blue moon. And they want a form to submit the data, save it to SharePoint, and then trigger a series 3 sequential approvals.
Oh, approvals. Okay.
With email the requester. You got rejected or denied.
Got it.
And
I think you can simplify. I think you can simplify this potentially.
First, I want to say, don't feel bad about using a Canvas app. You don't have to know any better.
To be clear, I'm not saying it's wrong. I just wanted to know what you're doing. Because
we were talking about model-driven apps earlier. How great they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Canvas apps are perfectly acceptable.
Absolutely.
And play a big role. So.
Especially in a scenario like this where you're just trying to quick do something. I'm gonna see if I can find I might or may not have a good example available at this.
I've gained a lot of clarification, and I was able to get the Canvas app to actually submit data back to the SharePoint list. So I'm actually able to do that now because I found some YouTube videos that showed me how to do it.
Yep.
So that I'm cobbling it together. But what frustrates me is that a lot of these videos, their Power App and their Power Automate UIs
Are
look
very different.
Very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
We don't
and
like it either.
I'm not-
Because that means our videos are outdated too, right? Now,
Well, and I'm not sure if I'm using a newer version of the
You are.
Power Apps. Okay. Because
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah, because before, like just a couple weeks ago or so, I want to say, there was when I got into my flow and started creating the flow from scratch, the first block, I forgot what the block is called, but
The trigger.
that first, yes, it looked, what does it usually say? Power Automate, Power something. I forgot I'm not in front of my computer.
Power Apps
but-
V2 versus not.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Exactly. Now it says Power Apps V2, and that's wonderful, but I can't find any YouTube videos that show me how to do it. And so I've been copying and again, I can trigger from saving I'm not particularly in love with triggering from the submit button, so I'm flexible.
yeah, so
But
I
I'm
think
getting-
so there's several things. Number one, you should realize that things happen from the SharePoint or from the Power Platform perspective on a regular basis. Microsoft is rolling out waves. Microsoft Ignite is like in 2 weeks. Microsoft's second wave, so the second major deployment of Power Platform changes actually happened in October and is supposed to be done by the end of this month. That's why you're seeing a bunch of changes. That's why you're seeing stuff radically change, because this is the one happened in like May or June or something. Like I can't remember exactly when, but it's wave 1, which is the first part of the year, and then this is wave 2, and you're getting just a ton of changes. So it's a little bit coincidental, like you're just starting to use it and Microsoft is making pretty major changes to the UI in regards to how all of this works. It'll be constant. It'll be fairly constant again for another 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and then there'll be another wave that happens that'll change it pretty heavily. It's just something that you kind of have to get used to a little bit. There is documentation about what's changing and why it's changing, but there's a lot changing, and so then it can be hard to find out what that is. But that's what's going on there. In regards to the thing you want to do, I don't know enough about what you're doing to give you a full understanding. The thing I can say is that this is, for example, a SharePoint list.
hold on, let's show this.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go.
If the people using it are comfortable using lists, there's no reason you can't just do new and item and then come in here and do integrate, and then I can choose Power Automate and I can say create flow. And then there's a bunch of options here. And I was looking for the approval because I feel like there should be an approval in here, but I couldn't see it right away. But basically, when an item is added in SharePoint, complete a custom action. So if I click this, it's going to immediately create a flow automatically for me with a trigger that will run whenever a new item is created in that list. Okay?
Okay.
So if I click continue here, I can come right in here and I can come and say, and I was hoping it would automatically populate. It might not. I thought it would have, but anyways, select your site, select your list, which I don't know if this one has a list. I got to go find the one I was actually on. This one, I think it was what it was. Yeah. And then basically I can add a new step for approval and then say, I want to do start and wait for approval and like configure the approval. This is like the easiest, straightforward, lowest barrier. Like I don't have to do any custom app. You go into SharePoint, you add a thing, this goes out for approval. They do an approval, they click OK, and maybe an email goes out. Like this is the most bare bones. Okay. That doesn't mean that your app is wrong. So if the reason to do an app would be you want a screen in front of it and you don't want to have them see the SharePoint interface and you just want it to be super basic, right? Even in the case that go ahead.
My understanding is, and I'm not sure if this is technically possible, I think they want an app because they don't want people touching the data on the list. It's financial approvals.
Yep.
They have to approve monies And so the people entering the data on the form, I'm thinking that they don't want those people touching the data on the SharePoint list once it's been approved.
Yeah.
That's why I'm guessing that they want the form.
Yeah. So there's a couple misconceptions that I want to clear up.
Okay.
This is one of the challenges with SharePoint. No matter what you do in an app, a Canvas app, when you're connecting to a list item, they're going to have permission to that list item to do something with it. Okay. So if I were to take this list as it is today and share it as a like somebody can edit it with everybody, all of those people, and then I create an app and the app doesn't actually give you doesn't show you it, it's like security through obscurity. That doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just means you aren't showing them how to do it. If they go into SharePoint and discover where that link is or discover where that data is, if you don't lock it down, you can see it, right? And what I mean by that is not that what you're saying is wrong, but that doing that, how I would handle that is I would go into the list settings for this list, and there's some advanced settings here that you can go into where you can basically say, hey, users can only read the items that were created by the user, and they can only create and edit items that were created by the user, right? Or they can only, so I would still want to lock down the SharePoint list the way you want it to be appropriately managed, regardless of what you do, right? And so that isn't in my opinion, that isn't a good reason to create a custom list. Now, it is a good reason, or a custom app. It is a good reason to say, I don't want them to have to be able to see all of the and kind of use the interface that is in SharePoint. That's not super convenient. It can be confusing. It has a bunch of other stuff. That's a good reason to not use the SharePoint list and create a Canvas app. But from a security perspective, you still need to secure it in SharePoint if you care about the security, right? If you said, I don't really care about the security, but I don't want them just to be able to browse it, cool, create a Canvas app, right? But if you're really worried about security, you have to manage that in SharePoint really, really. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I suspect we've got a queue of 6 projects that we got to hammer that are basically this idea.
Same thing, yeah.
And in most of those, security is not a concern. This one, I need to go back to the client and ask them how they feel about the security.
Yep.
But the rest of them, I think it's going to fall into we just want an app that, they're not having to go dig around in some SharePoint list, because this list that this client has, it's extensive. He goes on. There are columns and columns. And so I will need to create a Canvas app probably for this one as well.
So back to your Canvas app situation, I just want to review that quick so we can close that off. And then I think we've got some other questions I want to get to. But the Canvas app situation, I still would not try to trigger that Canvas or that approval from within this button, right? You can, what you're asking to do, you should be able to do. I should be able to create new flow, add it here, do some stuff, and make it work with multiple lines, which I could show you. But I'm going to tell you that I would still say create this flow, which is based on when the item is created, and just start your approval.
Then it doesn't matter if it's created from the list or
it doesn't matter anywhere.
Whenever something's added.
Whenever something's added, doesn't matter. It's always gonna do this. So that would be my just a high level recommendation. It doesn't mean that you can't do what you're asking. You're asking a very specific question. You can do that, but I wouldn't do it unless you have to, unless you have a good reason for it.
Right. And that's we can live with that. Trigger the flow when the item is created.
Yep.
So,
cool.
Okay.
We're gonna look at. Go ahead.
Go ahead. If you have one more thing, Cynthia.
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. I was just gonna say, there's one thing you can count on with Matt Dressel is a thorough answer. He cannot let anything be left untied. So yeah, thanks for that question. I'm actually going to go to, we have a question from Tanya in Teams here, but I'm going to go to Aaron on YouTube. I think this is the Aaron. Matt Dressel had his first real world, someone recognized him.
Based on YouTube, yeah.
In real life from YouTube. And that was his first instance of that. And
I think so, yes.
And he'll blush and everything, but it was kind of funny. It was a fun story for him to bring back to the team. This is Erin. She's asking, is there a way to make the model-driven UI better? Going from Canvas to model-driven UI can be a bit of a shock.
There isn't. Well, I say that, and it's not 100. Like
How
Mitch
hard
is
do you
saying,
want to bend it?
Yeah, I mean, you can. There's a bunch of stuff, Aaron, that you can do that will remove a bunch of the extra stuff that's going on in a model-driven app, so they aren't seeing this default, extra buttons for export and like all of
Yeah, you
these
can
things.
hide stuff.
Like you can hide stuff, but it's going to take work, and people are going to probably want it back, and so then maybe not.
The gist is, you kind of have to live within the walls. You can hide things. You can also embed Canvas apps,
Yep.
which our team has done on some projects with success, because there's, for instance, like if there's like 6 actions you want to take on something, you want to make those accessible, and model driven doesn't really do that well. So you can embed a Canvas app, but it still leaves a little bit to be desired, especially with those like stepped processes that we were just talking about with Canvas apps. Is you can do a business process. It's called a business process flow in model-driven apps that does step you through a process, but it's a little bit clunky. Like it can work, but it takes some finagling and isn't as intuitive as a full screen app that's just like fill out this one thing and click OK. So yeah, it's definitely leans more towards what Matt was saying is for like the management aspect, the person who wants to see the data and work with the data. And then they're also, I think they give it a visual refresh, or you can enable a visual refresh for it. Like Fluent UI.
Oh, there as of the latest wave,
Yes.
there is new, you can enable in your environment the new modern controls.
Yeah.
For Aaron in particular, I don't think it's intertenant, which answers another question that somebody else is providing. We do work with government customers. We don't work in the same way as what, like the question was whether or not we're registered as a SAM. We don't work in the same way for our government customers as we do for everyone else. And so because of that, we aren't registered in that way. Not that we necessarily would be opposed to that, but we aren't. But Aaron, to answer your question, I do not believe that you would have that modern stuff just yet. I think it's going to come to GCC in a month, 2 months, hopefully, maybe, if it passes all of their regulatory things. So, but that, to what your point was and what your question was, it will be a more refined UI. But if people hate,
facelift.
if people hate, like at the core, if people hate navigation on the left, grids and stuff, there's nothing you can do.
Right.
Like that is the benefit of a model-driven app is that is so flexible and can work for anything and is a known paradigm. The problem with it is if you don't like that, do a Canvas app. Like that's
It's not flexible in that regard.
Correct.
Yes. Let's jump to, we have one more question on YouTube, and then I know Tanya has one here in Teams. I don't know how to say Loic on YouTube. Asks, do I need a special license to build a model-driven app?
Special is questionable. You need a license to build a model-driven app. You need a license above a regular Office 365 license. That could be a Dynamics license if you're in a Dynamics environment. It could be a per user license. It could be a per app license. It could be, there's lots of different licenses that Microsoft sells for this stuff, but you do need a license to build a model-driven app because it requires access to Dataverse, which requires that additional licensing.
Cool. Thanks for the question. Tanya asks, can we talk through what you plan out before you start building? Do you figure out all the connection references, variables, etc., before you create a screen or a flow? After creating a solution, how do you know when you should do a separate environment versus a solution?
That's a lot to unpack.
We're going to do a podcast about this one.
Yeah, we should.
So we're going to hit pause. I'm just kidding.
So the things that I would say is we don't plan everything out ahead of time unless we need to. We focus on what the user, traditional development practice user story is. What's the outcome they're looking to get? And that's a lot of our focus before we start. Unless we're talking about something that has a serious technical ramification. So if a customer is like, I have to have drag and drop, and I have to have these specific look and feel to make it work, and they've proved to us somehow that is really important to them, we're going to go into the technology and do some prototyping and looking at it and figure out a bunch of stuff before we ever actually do anything in the application. Besides that, we're just going to go and start building. And we have spent time with our team about how we approach these things, and so they know, hey, when we're doing when we're doing something like this, you need to create an environment variable, and this is how that should work. When you're doing this, like we all have a shared understanding of the rules of engagement for how to deploy and manage these things, and so that is what shapes our the approach that we take to those things.
Do you have that spelled out anywhere?
Not really.
We probably don't even internally.
Not specifically.
Yeah.
But we have a shared. It's a lot of the stuff that comes from Microsoft. It's a lot of stuff we've been talking about.
Just read Microsoft and you'll get it.
Yeah, you'll get it eventually after 6 years. So
Tanya says she wants that desk guide.
Yeah.
Coming soon.
Maybe we'll put it in the as a resource. You talked about when to create environments, when to create another solution. So solutions are all about the purpose of the application. So if I'm working on we were just talking about like there's 3 lists or actually the one where we're talking about 3 different groups, and you've got like a person that's inputting the data and a person that's adding more things to the data and somebody approving. And let's say I created 3 different apps for that. Those should all be in the same solution. They're all dealing with the same data. They're all part of the same thing. If one of them breaks, it affects all of the other ones. It's one cohesive thing, including any environment variables or flows or whatever that. All of that should be packaged in a solution. If I get another request, like the request we heard earlier about, I have this financial data that I just want to get approval for. Let's say you're building an app for that. That needs to go in a separate solution. Those are 2 separate things. They need to go in a separate solution, right? The only, I'm going to call it exception, but the only further thing that is a common practice when you talk about large solutions within the Power Platform is to create multiple solutions for a common application. But you only do that in a scenario where they do it for Dynamics all the time. So Dynamics, there's a base solution that you deploy or application that you deploy that's like all the tables and all of the whatever, and then you deploy the sales component on top of that, and you deploy the financials one on top of that, and they're related, but they're not the same, right? They're selling the sales package on top of the baseline things, and so it's like the base plus is the way that approach happens. So that's another model. Most people that we talk to are not building something so large that is something they want to do. Like that's just not a common thing. It's very common in Dynamics, just to be clear. It's very common when extending a product that you're
Dynamics
that you're
has
doing.
like 80 different products.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's huge. It's a billion-dollar market, if you will, right? So that's another approach. In regards to environments, we always think about environments as what is the container and why does it matter? It's almost always dev, test, prod. It's almost always, when you talk about dev, it's almost always about, is it okay for, let's say Mitch is on a team and I'm on a team and I'm working on an app and he's working on a different app. If I shouldn't be able to mess with his stuff and he shouldn't be able to mess with my stuff, we ought to be in 2 different environments. Because the truth of the matter is, most of development environments, the developer is going to have pretty elevated permissions and they can mess stuff up. And if I can't,
would never do that.
If I can't trust you and you can't trust me, then
Not me.
Whatever, right?
I don't trust you though.
At the same time, if we've got 2 people on the same team or 2 people who communicate, extensively with each other on the all the time, maybe it's okay for them all to be in one dev environment, right?
He doesn't trust me. He doesn't give me admin permissions to almost anything.
Mitch doesn't get it. He's denied. I have a deny button. Anyways, I don't know that answered all the question, but that's how I think about it. That's how we think about it.
Cool. Thanks for that one, Tanya. Tanya drops valid or valuable questions like that all the time in our community.
Yes, she does. She is a member.
Which I want to just talk about quick. Someone asked, can I have more info on it? And I dropped sort of our marketing spiel in the chat. And this is the only form of anything that we really have right at the moment of sharing details about this. So it says the workplace is for leaders who want to use technology to create thriving and innovative workplace environments. Surround yourself with a supportive community for shared insights and collective growth. So the concept is you're in a members-only forum, and we host it. Matt's in there all the time answering questions. And then we're planning to host like a private monthly office hours if that works for our community and is something desired. And then we just came out with a Microsoft 365 update digest. So if you're used to getting all the admin feed of all the stuff that Microsoft is putting out,
Or you don't have access to it.
right, and you're wondering what's coming out and when is it coming out and do I need to worry about it, that all filters through Matt's brain and into a collective spot. So we're posting that.
As an example, I think it was Jen that was asking about like all this stuff changed. The digest says, "Oh, here's the new things that are coming out in the wave that might be interesting to you as a developer."
Yep. So that's one thing. And then we include we have a guidebook that's right on the verge of coming out. We're super excited about it. All of the resources that we put together are all there for the community. And I want to kind of underscore it with this phase is definitely like for the tire kickers, the ones who want to come in and help build and make this thing great. It is not something that we have buttoned up to a T and everything's super formal and refined. That's something we're working through in this process and then looking to launch.
And we're
next
looking
year.
for feedback about if you choose not to do it because of a reason,
Yeah.
we'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
If you use it and you
It's just
are
a mechanism for
we
us
would love to have some feedback.
to help people. Something where they don't have to engage us on thousands of dollars of a project. Us dedicate a project team to it. It's Matt kicking his feet up in his lazy boy, answering questions. So yeah, that's information about that. If you want to know more, I'm more than happy to if you wanted to jump on a call and me show you the space and talk through it or whatever, happy to do that too. But we don't have anything public facing at the moment. With that, we have a question from Chaz. I think that's how maybe you say your name. Sorry if I'm butchering that. They ask, do you have any federal gov clients currently? Or if not, are you registered in SAM?
That's the one that I kind of responded to.
You did
already.
respond.
Yeah,
I'm
a little
sorry.
bit, yeah. But I wasn't very direct. But yes, we did respond to that. We do work for GCC. We've never done work for GCC High or some of the other tenants or the other national tenants, but we have customers that in GCC, so we're familiar with it, but we are not registered
We're familiar
as a
with the
SAM.
constraints.
Yeah, we are very familiar with the constraints. Yeah, I think that was the only other question that was in chat.
Yeah. With that, we have about 5 minutes left. Anyone have? I see a couple typing. We'll give you a minute here before we go, but consider this last call for questions. Say, okay, good to know we're on E5 in regular GCC, not high. Cool. Tanya's chatting with him. Okay, cool. So it looks like we are all set at the moment. Thanks everyone for joining. It was great to meet you all and chat. Hopefully this was helpful. I dropped a link earlier in the chat, which was if we were able to help you, we'd love just give us a shout out. We'd love to share the benefits that you received with others so that others might join us and get help in the same way and kind of build this community. So all of that stuff is helpful.
And I don't think you said it. We went through I think we had 2 or 3 that came ahead of time. You don't have to wait to ask a question. If you have a question, feel free to send it to us. I believe there's some links in the
Ball.digital/office-hours.
Yep.
There's a form on there where you can drop questions.
So feel free to do it ahead of time, okay?
Cool. All right. Cool. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk again soon.